That's interesting. How are you going to know that? You're going to know it instantly, because these individuals are going to make sure that you remain disciplined, and they're going to make sure that you remain vigilant. Okay, so with that being said, we look at the title. Sweeping declaration was made. We're saying that we know what the melanated people's religion were. Mind you, we're going to redefine what you are, because then who you are opens up to infinite possibilities. We know that you are a carbon-based being, and what is carbon? That's what we're about to get into. You think it's not what you think. Like we said, your religion was alchemy. You're sitting up here, this is why all these other religions leave you confused. This is why all these other religions have you running around in circles. And this is why all these other people laugh and they scoff at you and they say, look, at least those, especially those who consider themselves to be the quote-unquote chosen people, they say, at least I provide you with a book. You running around talking about your Superman and your Superwoman. Provide me with evidence. Don't just go back to entertainment. I want to see something greater than that. That's controlled. I control that energy. See, at least if you have the ability to control that energy and you are in control of it, I can at least see your point. But I am the one that provides the checks and balances. I am the one that controls every area of life activity, like Dr. Billy Fuller and Dr. Francis Russ Wilson talked about: economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, sex, religion, and war. As long as they are affiliated with you in any respect, in any regard, in any of those disciplines, then you will never be free. You can't be free economically, then not be free politically. Makes no sense. Okay, we're about to show you that they run their matrix off of you, so that you look stupid talking about reparations. We're about to bust the doors down. Because see, what do we say about you being a carbon being? Let's just go right into it. Let's show you that each and every one of these examples are always going to go back to your religion, which was your science. Okay, and they say that you are a carbon being. Remember when we talked about that Superman, that so-called Superman, when he had the diamond on his chest? And that's one thing that brought back to my attention when the Most High talked to me right after that segment, and she said, oh, look, that was beautiful what you expressed to your people. But she said they need even more clarity. You were just off a little bit. And I said, how so? She said, because you said that they were the black Superman and the black Superwoman. I said, yeah, I looked at the alchemical charts, and that's exactly what it gave to me, that information. Is that not correct? She said, yeah, it is, but it's just slightly off. And I said, how so? She said, being slightly off can be just as disastrous. She said, what you have to understand is that you are not the derivative of anything. You are the pure form of this element that we call the godlike molecule carbon. So I said, oh, the Most High never ceases to amaze me. She was so right. I didn't question her because I thought that she was wrong. I just have a curious mind. And she said that, look, what you have to tell them is they're not the black Superman and black Superwoman, not the black Superman or the black Superwoman. They are the real Superman and the real Superwoman. That's what they need to know. How so is this real? Remember, hey, Ruth, this is facts over feelings, not theories over feelings. How are you going to prove that black people are the real Superman and the real Superwoman? Easy. This is easy work. I'm going to show you that it was hidden all in plain sight. See, they said you were made up of carbon. Like we said, what did we establish? We said C18, H10, N2O4. 18 carbon atoms, 10 hydrogen atoms, 2 nitrogen atoms, and 4 oxygen atoms. That makes up the melanin molecule. You are a supercharged form of carbon. That molecular formula you can easily look up. We already went over that. Now, so what else do we determine? We determined that, like they said, we took a look at and isolated that so-called superhero called Superman, and he had the diamond on his chest. So what is pure carbon? Okay, carbon, when you isolated that element out of the periodic table of elements, what do you have? You take carbon. When carbon does not bond, listen to me, melanated gods and goddesses. When carbon does not bond with any of those other elements in the periodic table of elements, when it just bonds with itself, it creates diamond. It's called pure carbon. Diamond is just Greek for invincible. So when the Greeks ran into this entity, they called it the invincible cube. That's what you need to understand. So it's pure carbon. And what did we discuss carbon was? Oh, we didn't define that yet? Let's go even deeper, melanated gods and goddesses. Pure carbon is a diamond, and also carbon is Latin for coal. And you have to understand, keep that in your memory. Why is there science being articulated to you through their dead language called Latin? A Latin was referred to as a liturgical language that's used in rites and rituals. Why is a religious language teaching you science? Anyone who has been at the collegiate level knows that if you are getting a college degree in health, you know that you have to take classes in anatomy and physiology. And you also know that you have to learn the body in Latin. What is Latin? A dead language, a language, like we said, used for rites and rituals, teaching you science for. Because their science was our religion. Because our religion was our science. So what do you have to understand? Remember, we told you, they said that carbon is coal. What is coal? Coal is this black substance. Okay, so what you have to understand is that this matrix is built off of the energy that you are made of. Literally. Let's go deep. Hold on. You see the Most High working through me right now. I'm charged. I'm charging. We can go to the receipts because first of all, like we said, we know that what he has done is created this God complex, and many people suffer from it. So they always have to hear him say it too as well in order to confirm. But that's what we're doing. That's the nature of this exercise. We're going to use his science against it. We're not going to talk and go back and reach what our African ancestors called gods. We're not going to talk about what indigenous people call gods in all different places of the so-called globe. We're going to go use his science and confront him with it so that at the end of the day, it will be irrefutable. And the only thing that he will be able to do is continue to keep pressing on with his agenda and ignoring you completely because that is in its nature. Let's move on. Let's provide the receipts. Let's provide the receipts. Okay. Now, this concept will be in any organic chemistry book. Reminds me of what we said before. We said they have to learn this chemistry in order to navigate in this dimension, right? But not only that, let's go even further. Like we said, we got to go deeper. Not only do you have to learn this chemistry, why would you have to learn this chemistry? Because you have to have carbon to even exist in this dimension. The stuff that you are made of, brothers and sisters, you have to have, not just, because it's cute, because you have to have it. Period. There is no exceptions. Let's watch what he says. It would be, now this is from blogs.scientificamerican.com. He says, it would be impossible for life on Earth to exist without carbon. To even exist! Carbon is the main component of sugars, proteins, fats, DNA, muscle tissue, pretty much everything in your body. Remember we talked about cellular respiration? We talked about how you're breaking down carbohydrates and took a look at the simple molecule called glucose. It's C6, it's H12O6. That is 6 carbon atoms, 12 hydrogen atoms, and 6 oxygen atoms. That makes up the simple molecule called glucose. That what happens when you breathe in oxygen, the oxygen hits the carbohydrates, carbon and hydrogen, splits them, and when that energy is split, it creates something called ATP or adenotriphosphate, which is said to be made in the mitochondria of the cell. Right? And that's what powers you. That's what they claim. But then in chemistry, in organic chemistry in the lab, they say something completely different. And in biochemistry, this is the language that they use. Remember we talked about the compartmentalization of information, how they're adept at that? We got to catch that. So understand this, like he said, you go back, he says carbon is the main component of all. We've already understood that. And what is carbon? Carbon is Latin for coal. Let me show you how they power the whole matrix. Let me break it down. We're just getting started. So we're already exposed what pure carbon is. So how can Man of Steel, how can this European be the man of steel, i.e. the man of carbon? Because what is interesting, brothers, what did we already determine about melanated gods and goddesses? In order to make steel, you need carbon. Carbon is what makes steel. Matter of fact, when you add more carbon, because the average steel is 2% carbon. So when you add even more carbon, you get something called cast iron. Cast iron is what they make engine blocks out of. Okay? And then see, what happens is, like we said before, carbon does what? When it bonds in crystalline form. That's the only way that carbon bonds is in crystalline form. So not just when it bonds with itself. Remember we talked about how when carbon just bonds with itself, it creates diamond. Also, when carbon bonds with any other element, it bonds in crystalline form. That's the only way that carbon bonds. It's called diamond cubic. And remember we said that the diamond means invincible in Greek, so invincible cube. And so the base cell of carbon is cubes. That's what you need to know. So this basic building block builds diamond when it's all alone, and then obviously when it mixes with other elements, it also crystallizes. That's why even when carbon bonds with iron, what does it make? Steel. That is an ionic bond. That also creates an alloy. What is an alloy? An alloy is when a metal and a non-metal bond together, and also non-metals bonding together. But in this instance, carbon is the non-metal, and the metal is iron. And when that comes together, it creates an alloy. What's the alloy? Steel. And you, melanated brothers and sisters, like we said, have iron in your blood and carbon in your skin. Therefore, technically, you are the man of steel and the woman of steel. We just determined that. So we determined pure carbon, and we determined that, look, what they've done is hidden from you that you run this entire matrix. Because they said that what? In Latin, we're going to commit these things. Remember, we're going to wake you up. In Latin, carbon means coal. Now, this is what's interesting. What are fossil fuels? We know it was a consensus taken. We don't even really have to know the statistical data. We know how important fossil fuels is to this matrix. It runs the entire matrix. They even said 85% of industrialized nations depend on fossil fuels. We know they depend on it in a myriad of other different ways. But we're just going to say what they said to us. This is what they told us. Remember, this is their science. And what are fossil fuels? Fossil fuels are carbon. Okay, carbon deposits. Because what did he tell us that wasn't a different type of fossil fuels? He said coal is one. And what is coal? Carbon is Latin for coal. And coal is made from what? Plants. He said when the plants decompose due to the pressure and the heat, it created carbon in the form of coal, called coal. Okay? And then what did he do? He creates these mines and and has these shafts and creates these mines and digs for the coal. And he even has something called strip mining, where he takes the coal out of these sites, digs up the soil and the rocks, gets the coal out of the ground, and then just puts the soil and the rocks back. Okay? I'm going to take you on, we're going to visualize something for a second. We're going to take you on a journey, brother. You melanated gods and goddesses, you're going to understand exactly what you are. So what he does, how does he use these fossil fuels? Well, there's three types of fossil fuels. One is called coal. That comes from plants decomposing. And then the other is natural gas and oil. He says that comes from animals, other carbon beings, when they decompose. And remind yourself, these things are non-renewable. So why would the Most High people that's why we never dug any of these things up. First of all, we're made of the stuff, so why would we need to be digging it up? But they're non-renewable. So what does he do? We talked about the three forms. That is coal, that is natural gas, and that is oil. Usually natural gas and oil deposits are found in the same place. So he gets the authority from these governments that he's been able to give credibility to, and they give them the authority to dig these wells. He puts these pumps down, and then what happens also too as well is sometimes he has to inject steam down there because the goo is so thick, and he has to decrease the density. And he pulls it up. And what does he do? We're about to visualize this. The Most High is about to take you on a journey. He takes these fossil fuels and he puts them in his power plants. And then he heats these fossil fuels up. And then what happens is the hydrocarbons that are in the fossil fuels begin to break. And when that bond is broken, energy is released. And that energy, what it does, it heats up the water. And then steam it obviously comes about. And when the steam builds up pressure, what it does is it turns the turbines. And then the turbines begin to spin. And then the turbines spin, it begins to rotate this magnet. The magnet that is encased in this generator. And then when the magnet spins, and then it increases speeds, it begins to produce these electrons. And then the electrons begin to power the electrical grid. You are the ones that power the Matrix. Remember when the so-called character of Keanu Reeves, Neo, when he came out, mind you, Will Smith was supposed to play that character, which would really put this in perspective. And he came out of those pods where he was the battery. Your people are the battery for this Matrix, literally. How are they going to give you reparations and give you to you? You already have it. You sound ridiculous. It's in your skin. From his engines, to his planes, to his guns. Everything is made out of the same substance you are made out of. That's why he doesn't want you to wake up. You are literally connected to everything. That's why he's so scared of you. Y'all running around like, oh, the black man didn't even have a gun. He didn't even have... You think this is a lady who wrote a book about post-traumatic syndrome, or PTSD from, acquired from slavery. And she called it post-traumatic slavery, something to that effect. I'm not sure, something worded like that, because I briefly took a look at it. But it's crazy how we think like that, but we don't realize since we were the gods of this realm, and we lived and we were the technology, we running around being radiated beings, being able to express ourselves in many different forms, having an incredible amount of power, you would be scared too. And I'm going to show you how the Matrix, like I said, not only runs off of you, but the eventuality of this is so dark and so insidious, it's going to be mind-blowing. Me proving that alchemy was your true religion is the least of my words. You understanding the eventuality of what's going to happen to this realm is what's going to be mind-blowing. That's what's going to tear you apart. So let's continue. We see that they have built this whole system. All of it relies on fossil fuels. Fossil fuels come from carbon. What is carbon? Carbon is Latin for coal. So they said you are a carbon being. They've already told you your molecular formula for melanin, and they've already established that you are this black stuff. Hold on. Once again, we are aware of the God complex from the European that most people's minds are contaminated with these Oreos. They run around black on the outside. We know what in the middle. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull up another receipt, right? And this is going to be interesting. And we're going to see how he also, when he has to give the information, he has to play around with it because he doesn't want to give it up to as well. So, look, and you all can go to this. Like I said, I bring up big receipts. We're going to hear it from his mouth. What's that website? That's NASA. That's Climate Kids. That's NASA's website for kids. So we can see that obviously this is baby food, right? Now, this is interesting. I scroll down, And I took a screenshot of this, obviously, and we're going to read a couple paragraphs. You see this illustration, you see this little white boy, you see this coal, you see this carbon, because carbon is Latin for coal. And you see these plants. Let's read. All living things on earth contain carbon. Even you contain carbon. Lots of it. If you weighed 100 pounds, 18 pounds of you is pure carbon. And plants are almost half carbon. Now pause. First of all, he needs to correct himself because we already know what pure carbon is. When carbon, like what you said, when carbon is pure, that means that it's just bonding with itself. When it's bonding with itself, all it makes is a diamond arrangement. It makes a crystal arrangement called diamond cubic. Carbon only bonds in diamond form. You are a diamond people. And you see why he's not going to correct it. He doesn't need to elaborate. He's not going to hide it. It's right here. Let's go on. With so much carbon, why isn't everything black and sooty? How can dogs be white and trees green? Because carbon, an element, combines easily with other elements to form new materials. The new stuff called compounds are quite different from pure carbon. Gut check. We didn't ask you about new materials and new compounds. The question is, how can dogs be white and trees green? Pause. Brothers and sisters, melanated gods and goddesses, let everybody know, if you cannot understand what you have read, you cannot read. Reading comprehension is essential and is the primary tool that you need to use in order to dismantle the matrix that they have put before you. You have to understand that the question that was asked was, how can dogs be white? It's a two-part question. We're saying not only how can dogs be white, how can a dog be a dog and white, and how can a tree be green? How can this differentiation occur? And they tell you, they said that, look, it's because when carbon forms with other elements, it crystallizes into another organism. But he's slick and he says, because carbon, an element, combines easily with other elements to form new materials. He's calling new organisms new materials. See, that's no secret. You think he's hiding all in his shows and his documentaries he's talking about, oh my God, we don't know what made the universe, the mysteries of the universe. Oh, we can only answer these questions. How did it start? It starts from carbon. They just told you. But they know you are made out of it and connected to it. And you are an explosive form of energy. They cannot let you awaken, you melanated gods and goddesses. They cannot allow it to happen. So we just showed you that this is what carbon is, right? And so the thing is that we have to understand is this. When we're taking a look at, we're going to pull up the receipts because a lot of times it's hard to kind of visualize, obviously, the periodic table of elements. So we're going to go off and we're going to pull this up right quick because we're going to go deeper. We're going to show you that this was your true religion. Now, let me kind of, and I hope that you guys get, got a periodic table of elements yourself, or maybe you got a chemistry book lying around and you could be able to, pull it up. So I'm going to try to do my best. Now, what you see is, this is one thing that you have to understand. This is the king's list. This is the family. Now, if this is responsible for all life on earth, this is your king's list. This is what's, look, now I'm going to explain this and walk with me for a second. Be patient. Now, what you have, and this is the periodic table of elements. Now, you have these horizontal groups. These horizontal groups are called periods. So you have the first period up here. Up here, that's the first period. This is the second period. This is the third period. This is the fourth period. So on and so forth till you get down. There are 7 periods. Okay? And then you have these vertical columns. They're called groups. Okay? And then you have 18 of those groups. All these elements, they're in these same groups or families because they are related to one another. They express sort of the same behavior, if you will. All right? And then so when you go way over here, what you have is in group 14, you have the carbon group. Okay? That's the family that we come from. That's what we're made out of. We've already established that with the chemical formula of melanin. So we're made out of carbon. Now what's interesting, look, like I said, think about it. They call these periods. Now look what's up here. We know that hydrogen sits along in its own place, right? And then you have helium. All right? And quickly, I'm just going to explain a couple stories. Now, hydrogen, now mind you, all this is in Latin. All these symbols are in Latin. Carbon is Latin. All these names are Latin. All these symbols are Latin. Okay? Hydrogen, or Greek in origin, but mainly obviously Latin. And so, hydrogen means what? Hydro, water. The suffix gen means born or race or birth. Hydrogen literally translates to the birth of water. And then they tell you that your sun is made mostly out of hydrogen, correct? And then through those chemical reactions, it creates helium. Helium means helios, Latin for sun. So they're saying when the water was born, it birthed a sun. Oh, this man. Okay. Okay, you about to walk with me. You about to walk with me. All right? And so this is what you have to understand in this family. Let's isolate the carbon family. Okay. The carbon family, right here, second column, you have carbon, you have silica, you have germanium, you have tin, and you have lead. Now, interesting story, just to show you how, this is a Masonic, table. You already know that this is already written in Latin, which we already discussed as a liturgical language. Now, you look at you isolate lead, for instance. Now, lead, you see that symbol, PB. That PB means plumboga or plumbum. Plumbum is Latin for lead. That's why the symbol is PB. This is all Latin. You see what I'm saying? So the thing is that it's interesting. In the 16th century, there was a deposit of graphite found in what was called Barlesdale, England, around the 16th century. And the metallurgist, mind you, because metallurgist is just another name for masons, right? Because you would have to be a mason to be able to insert and name elements in this periodic table of elements. So the metallurgists, they ran into this graphite and they thought that it was black lead. But yet it was just another form of carbon, because the softest form of crystallized carbon is graphite. That's what you use in pencils. Okay? And so they called it black lead. That's why that actually is a myth. There is no lead in pencils. It's graphite. Graphite, the reason why they didn't correct that, because they wanted you to assume that just little ways to throw you off that carbon isn't everything. So when black people talk about how we came over and invented writing, we not only invented writing, the very thing that you have to use to write with is made out of the very substance that makes our melanin. So when someone says that writing came from you and language, not only language came from you, writing came from you, obviously so, because it's made out of the same stuff. Look up what I'm saying. There is no lead in pencils. It's graphite. Graphite is another form of carbon. The black stuff. So you're actually writing with it. You're actually writing with something that you're made out of. This is what I'm telling you. They built their whole matrix out of you. From you came forth their reality. Let's continue. So, like, we see that that's what that stands for, right? And then so what we're going to isolate also, we're going to isolate silica. Silica is right under carbon. Notice too, let me bring this down. They show you that electronegativity or electrical power increases as you go from left to right. And it also decreases as you go down. Okay? And so what do you see when you look up here? You see what? You see carbon, the most electronegative compound or elements that a person could be made out of, you're made out of. Look, you see carbon right there, you see nitrogen right there, and you also see oxygen right there. Highly electronegative. And then you see hydrogen. So you got what? C18, 18 of those. You got 2 of those in nitrogen, you got 4 of those in oxygen, and you got 10 of those in hydrogen. Ever heard of a hydrogen bomb, people? You're made of the most electrical elements on the table. Those elements, when you add this, with this, and that makes a melanin molecule. This is the cake. This is right here in front of you. They didn't hide it from you. You don't need no $700, $800 books to know what the hidden science is. It's right here. This is what you have to remember. We talked about glucose. C6H12O6. So when you put 6 of these, 6 of these, and 12 of these together, you get a glucose molecule. Life is right here. You not only get different compounds, you get different organisms. See, what you have to understand, bro, they slipped. They're about to bring another elemental being in here. And I'm finished, like I said, some of these things I'm going to double back because I got to get a lot of information out. If you notice, like, I think in 2014 or 15 or something, they added 4 new elements to what's called the 7th period. Now, remember what we talked about. When you add carbon with any other of these elements, because the only way you can get into this realm is if you add it with carbon, because carbon stabilizes things. When you add carbon to any of these elements, then you get new organisms. Now, mind you, you can't make an element unless it fuses. And what I mean by that, they create these so-called elements in what's called particle accelerators. I'm pretty sure some of you are familiar with this. So these particle accelerators, right, what they do is they bounce what's called, ions against one another, and ions are just what's called charged atoms. And if the nucleus merges with one another, then they essentially create a new element. And then when they get that new element, then they combine to a carbon and create new beings. Because all their technology is just technology that is reverse engineered. You think he's smart? He in his labs with our insects, with our plants, with our marine life, reverse engineering the technology. That's all he's doing. You see what I'm saying? So this is how he's going to come about bringing about new organisms and claim that they're going to come from space. But this is how he brings about these new elements. Therefore, you heard the movie about Fifth Element and all these different. Man, I'm about to break it down. Okay, so when we're isolating this carbon family and we see silica is important. Why is silica important? Because silica is sand. Okay, sand is silicon dioxide. Silica, when it bonds with a lot of oxygen, those are some of the most abundant elements, obviously, in the earth, or they so-called called the earth crust, right? So, what happens is that when silica begins to bind with oxygen and creates what's called these tetrahedral rings, and a lot of times, they're called cyclosilicates. That's when you create a ring with more than 3 tetrahedral formations in one ring. And tetrahedral is just another fancy way of saying pyramids. Okay, and why am I saying all this? I'm gonna catch you up. I know I'm saying a lot, but I'm gonna bring it full circle. Now the thing is like this sand. What? How do you make glass? You make glass by heating up sand. Glass is liquid sand. When they add limestone to it, that's what causes it to maintain its structure. Because if they didn't add limestone to it, you can put that glass in water and it will turn into a liquid. So you see a lot of the symbolism that was in the Matrix, and you see why that mirror turned into a liquid. I'm going to get into that later on in the other segment, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. So the reality of it is that this silicon is underneath carbon. It is in the carbon family. It is in the carbon family. Why is it important? Some of these elements actually come out of carbon. That's how you know most of this is just really a manipulation of carbon, and they're making an excuse. Because you actually, look, and I'm going to tell you something. This is what's crucial, and you can do this research. Now, let me break this down. Like I said, this is the carbon family. They all behave the same, and they all come from carbon. Carbon is the parent. That's what you need to understand. And so when the silicon and this oxygen get together, what do? They create quartz. Okay, that's what are in sand. And we know we use liquefied sand in order to make what? Glass. And then you wonder why they sit up there and they trip and they wonder about, I wonder who the people were who built the pyramids. The sand that even surrounds those pyramids are made up of us. Even the sand, melanated gods and goddesses. You see, and that's why when we talk about the so-called sand people, and I'm just be real, people call them sand niggas, right? Is because this is they wrote themselves into the king list. They're right here, right in the silica family. Okay? This is one of the reasons why, if you notice, when we go back to languages and you look at, a branch of the Afro-Asiatic tongue, which is what? The Semitic languages. And the Semitic tongues are what? Hebrew, Arabic, all that those are branches of the Afro-Asiatic tongue. Therefore related to us, therefore in the carbon family. And we usually associate these people with Middle Eastern or with the sand. Okay? Look how they write themselves into our king list. Look at one of the other elements when you go down. You have what's called germanium. Alright? And germanium is Latin for Germany. That's what you need to understand.
Wow.
And so, look, when you go down, it loses electrical power. These people don't have our power. You lose electrical power. Okay? So when we look at silica, what's so important about silica? Ever heard of Silicon Valley? They're using an artificial or a lesser form of you to create their supercharged matrix. So when they start creating this so-called AI, remember, like I said, brothers and sisters, how is it the fact that we allowed this so-called European to tell us that something artificial is greater than something natural? He does the same thing with his food, convinces us that you can just throw some stuff in the lab and put it together and it's better than what nature can put together. He's doing the same thing. This Silicon Valley, all these materials are a step below you. So he's using the silicon to do what? Create his technology, to create the matrix. And then what is he going to do? Everybody's talking about, this AI, you will be connected. Black man, Superwoman, and Superman, you're already connected to each other. You already have the natural intelligence. You don't need AI. You're about to be destroyed because this is not clicking to you. So what you have is what? You have this being the soup, this being the template, that how life was created. Alright? And so you gotta stick with me, about to bring all of this stuff full circle. And this was your religion. This was your science. It's all right here. Because like we said, they're lying. All of this, as we know, is a manifestation of carbon. They've already admitted that. Because look at helium over here. Helium, they said from Helios, the sun element. Basically. And how do they get the sun? They make an excuse because this is where outer space gains validity. Oh, well, helium is so light and it's made by the sun, it just goes back in outer space, so we can't track it. So we get most of our helium and extracting it from what? Natural gas. They taking this helium out of carbon. And why is that important? Helium is important for stuff like cryogenics. Cryo meaning cold, genics meaning generating cold. They study stuff under the cold because they come from the cold. That's why that's important. And helium, when you liquefy it, it helps to cool their magnets. Like they wouldn't even be able to do any MRIs. The hell with your balloons at your kid's birthday party. Helium is used in order for them to experiment to bring these beings from the cold into our existence. We're going to continue with the next segment.
Holy smokes, dude. That's deep.
This week, good as fuck. I'm tired of this.
I wonder if they'll let fucking shit. I wonder if I can use my fucking Cash App account or my Chrome account from the send money to. They can switch it right to that and transfer money right to my versus cards. Instead of using a card, their card. You feel me? I found out in the morning. Hopefully that'll be smooth. They do it like that.
One thing that you can believe right now, being that your card can't swipe don't mean that your card can't spend money and move money. You can be able to move that money to a card.
No, I tried. They won't do it. I want to transfer from card to card the same exact card.
Tell me, if you can't connect that card to your PayPal.
Can't do none of that shit. That's what I'm saying.
You can't connect it to your Chrome?
No. None of that.
Do you have a Chrome card?
I have a Chrome card. Still can't do it. My PayPal, got Cash App, and all that. I tried it all. I can't do it. Oh, shit.